Lucas, one of the things you are famous for is that you mastered Chinese martial arts.
I'm not famous for that. No.
You're not famous? Then
I'm
you're
more
gonna
well
become
known.
famous.
I'm more
for
well
that
known for my
after this
aforementioned
show.
ability to speak Chinese, but people generally know I'm interested in martial arts. Like people who know me well enough. Like,
People who know you well enough,
Yeah.
and that's how people introduce you.
No,
That's
people.
the guy who can speak
No,
Cantonese
yeah,
and fun
no.
Chinese
Like
martial arts.
when people introduce me, is like this is Lucas and he speaks Cantonese, and this is a little bit embarrassing, but they do it for fun. Like, oh, this is Lucas and he speaks Cantonese. But generally, no, unless somebody asks. I don't say like, because martial arts seems like a boring enough topic to talk about, so I just usually keep it to myself.
Let's try to keep it fun then. When you decide to start it and why?
Oh, I must have been 5 because it was back in the early 90s, where it must have been 1990, maybe 91, when my dad bought a VCR. And, VCR, he collected those, some cassette tapes, and we didn't know what was on them. He copied them from a friend of his or something like that. And one of them was an action movie. I think it was a Steven Seagal movie, but I can't be sure. And I was like, hey, I want to do what this guy does, right? Because it's like you see an action
of course,
hero,
you're getting
and
influenced, especially as a child.
Yeah, and then everybody, when I was like 6 and 7 and 8 years old, everybody was like, yeah. I remember one guy told me, oh, I had the same phase. I was like, what is he talking about? I had the same phase. Everybody has a martial arts phase. I'm like, it's not a phase. It's like, this is what I'm passionate about it,
So what was that? Was it karate?
When I got interested in martial arts, nobody knew anything else than the word karate, right? Everybody was like, oh, karate this, karate that, everything is karate. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's karate. But then I started reading about different stuff, and there was Bruce Lee, and I found out Bruce Lee was Chinese, and it opened up this whole world of Chinese martial arts for me, that I was like, oh, it's not all karate. And
can we name them? If you at least some of them.
Originally, I didn't know the difference between, like, I heard something here, and I heard something there, and I read something here, and I tried to make sense of all that. But it was all like bits and pieces of information. So my image of what martial arts actually were, or how they were trained, was really, really distorted when I was a kid. But the bottom line was that I really wanted to do it, and this gave birth to my interest in languages, Chinese languages, and stuff like that.
Was it the Wing Chun, the one that you start learning when you came here already?
I started Wing Chun in, I think it was late 1997. But it was not by choice. It was because at that time I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I kept telling my mom every year, like, find me a kung fu school. And they're like, how about karate? No, kung fu. What difference does it make? I'm like, no, I know,
Yeah, if you can tell us, what's the difference between Wing Chun and kung fu, and is there any difference?
Well, so the key is in how these words are used. Like the word kung fu, for example. When we say kung fu, we're thinking like guys in pajamas. I mean, not myself per se, but foreigners.
In a temple.
Right? Yeah, in a temple, like a Shaolin monk and stuff like that. But actually in Chinese, the word kung fu means something like a high level of skill. So I'll give you an example. I was in Yongding, where the Hakka houses are, the famous Hakka houses. And when you to get there, you have to take that like weird, twisted, windy road. And we saw there's like a wall by this, because it was a wall here, like a rock wall here, and a complete drop on the other side. It was a dangerous path. And there was like a little wall to protect you from falling. And some car just like it stopped on the wall. Like the 2 wheels were on the other side of the wall. Like
you mean like
it was this far away from toppling onto the other side. And our tour guide, he looked at the car as like, 好功夫可以去表演,
okay.
Which means 好功夫, which means good kung fu. It wasn't kung fu at all. He was making fun of poor driving skills of the guy. But this is how the word is used in Chinese. It just means high level of skill. If you were a juggler, Chinese people say, "Oh, 好功夫."
Hmm.
But normally, when Chinese people refer to Chinese martial arts, they say 中国功夫for some reason, which means Chinese kung fu.
Chinese kung fu.
Yeah, but we tend to call kung fu every form of Chinese martial art, which is a completely different way, like the different way we use the word. So yeah, Wing Chun in that respect will
Is
be
one of the forms.
one of the types of kung fu, but in China, it's just one of Chinese martial arts.
Are there many types?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like dialects of languages. You know, the main difference. The way I realize. I mean, I realize after years of researching that stuff that the main differences are in the strategy. Like say wrestling and boxing, right? So
Mhm.
some people like to punch and they think this is a more reliable way, and some people like to grapple. So naturally, because the strategy is different. What you intend to do is different. The technique's going to be different, and the way you practice those techniques will be different too.
But what's the final point? Because you're saying depends on your strategy and depends on your final goal. What's the final goal? Is it to drop your opponent on the ground?
Well, in the case of
Or
Wing Chun, it was to close the gap between you and the guy as fast as possible, and hit him as many times, like not as fast as, because this is also a misconception about Wing Chun, that you have to do this weird windmill of punches, which is
Mhm.
not what at least what I do. But generally try to hit uh, the guy as many times as, or as hard as possible, but not once, like at least 3 times.
But how the counting will be the amount of punches I did, the amount of closing distances I've made?
I mean, it's,
Is there any definition of to say, okay, this guy is
well,
the
the bottom line I would say is that you because if we get into a fight, we tend to think of punches as like, oh, if I punched him, like I won, right?
Mhm.
Or like I'm gonna punch him here, and then maybe if he,
I mean, there are points, right? If we talk about boxing or what they're doing in UFC, those are points of punches, or if you knock someone down,
right, right.
obviously,
Well, Chinese martial arts were originally they were
or if
not.
someone is submit.
Right, the Chinese martial arts were not practiced as a sport originally, so they don't really they don't always mix well with sports.
Mhm.
They don't always work as well in a athletic environment. But it's really hard to pinpoint, because obviously um, the main goal of you fighting somebody is to win, right?
Of
To
course.
or not to lose, which
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
in terms of self defense. It's not to
To
get
lose and
hurt,
protect yourself.
right? So the
But
strategy in Southern martial arts was basically to get close and strike,
mhm.
whereas in Northern martial arts was to get close and throw and sweep, like very generally speaking.
But if you're saying that it's not intent to be a sport, what is it then?
Well, we have to understand that back when it was when these martial arts were being created, which was like, I don't know, 18th, 19th century, especially in southern China, was a very a very violent place, because there was barely any stable, government.
Mhm.
Uh, Too much to talk about. There's like uprisings, secret societies. There
But
was,
it makes sense. So the influence, what was happening at that time, is influenced the how it looks right now, right?
yeah.
But why then? Why it's not developed in the way of sport and it's not developed in a way of self defense that you can actually use?
You can use it. It's just that if you get into a situation of self defense, or like sort of sudden violence,
Mm.
it's not exactly the same as a sport setup where you have two guys who know that they're fighting,
Mhm.
and what you do is not always the same. It like admittedly, if you have a guy who does traditional martial arts, and if you have a guy who does combat sports, and you put them in the combat sports setup, you know, the person
Hmm.
who feels better in the setup,
Obvious.
prevails.
So, Lucas, you told me that Wing Chun is not a sport. Then what is it then?
Well, traditional martial arts, because like what we to understand the difference between traditional martial arts, what they used to be, and what the combat sports are right now, we need to make this distinction between traditional martial arts, combat sports, and self-defense, which are three
Hmm. Similar,
different
but
ball
not the
games.
same. Yeah.
Um, the setup and the aim is different. In combat sports, you have a setup where two people try to get into a fair match to see which one of them is better. No, like it doesn't have to be martial arts. It can be a ball game, like
Hmm.
a football game or something. But the fact that it's a sport, it's a competitive game of who's better. In a self defense situation, the aim is not to get hurt. So if you don't get yourself in that situation, that's the best solution. It doesn't mean that you get into, like, you proactively get into a dangerous situation to punch the guy out,
Again,
because
right.
that's against the
The
purpose
point and
of,
the
yeah,
purpose. Yeah.
of self defense. You're not defending yourself, you're attacking
Hmm.
other people. Whereas in traditional martial arts, it was context based, where these people, because of the violent surroundings in which they operated, they would oftentimes actively engage in violent situations for one reason or another. And the objective was not to prove that they were better, or to not get hurt as much as to it was to hurt other people, right, to kill them.
Hmm.
So if you look at traditional martial arts techniques, they don't mix well with contemporary sports,
Sports and combat
there's a
sports.
lot, yeah, because there's a lot of like eye gouging and attacking of the throat and stuff like that, which are it's not only that they're illegal in combat sports, it's that they require a different sort of movement. Like you don't need a lot of force or a lot of swing to poke somebody in the eye, and if you do that, the reaction of that person is going to be different than
Different.
if you punch them with a closed fist, right? It doesn't necessarily, if you do that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a better fighter than somebody else. But again, that's not your point, to be better. If you get in a fair match, you may get your ass kicked. But originally, that was not the point.
Not the initial purpose.
Yeah.
Interesting. What is White Crane in that story?
So, White Crane is a traditional Chinese martial art from Fujian province, which doesn't get a lot of credit, as much credit as it should nowadays. Originally, what people known as so-called Southern Shaolin Temple wasn't. I probably I'll get a lot of heat for that, for saying this, but um, it seems that it wasn't an actual place, but it was more of a code word. And if you read Chinese literature on the topic, it all like sort of is in agreement with this statement, that it wasn't a place, but it was all the places that had to do with the activity of the Chinese secret societies. And those secret societies originally wanted to fight against the Qing dynasty, but later developed into sort of criminal activity.
Sorry, I want to stop here for a second.
Right.
So the actual story is that this place was an actual temple where
No.
the secret.
Well, no.
What's the main narrative? So you saying it was not the
No.
real place? It was more of
No, so
a.
there is a Shaolin temple in Henan province,
Mhm.
which is the Shaolin temple, the only one.
Mhm.
And then there you will read a lot of stories about South Shaolin Temple being located in Fujian province, somewhere in the Zhangzhou area. But if you start reading and investigating the topic, you'll realize there are claims put forward, because there isn't a temple there nowadays. There are several different temples in different places in
Mhm.
Fujian province, and they all lay claim to being the original Shaolin
Place,
temple.
yeah.
So there might have been one main temple, there might have been several, but the bottom line is that they all had all these places were the hotbed of those secret society activity. And so they came up with those people. They came up with um, certain martial arts that were based on older military based fighting methods. And in Fujian province, originally there were five sort of similar martial arts, and White
White
Crane was
crane.
one of them. And so White Crane became popular because it spread all over the province and outside onto Guangdong province, Taiwan, and then Okinawa, which was back then not yet Japanese. And based on those techniques and those strategies that White Crane taught, martial arts like Wing Chun, like Hong Kun, like uh,
But in
well,
this case, white crane must be more for combat because you said it was based on the military.
yeah, well, it was well. They were all developed for combat. It's just that White Crane was it developed, in my opinion, it developed so fast and into so many different variations that it almost became different martial arts with the same name.
Mhm.
And then when it got adopted by people in Guangdong, it mixed with other martial arts, and it changed the way it did, and it gave birth to like Wing Chun and other martial arts.
Do you know more about that secret society that you mentioned? What is
Yeah,
the story behind
since they
it?
were secret, it's really hard to research this
Yeah,
topic.
when.
But basically, somewhere around I think it was 1750s, there was this society created in the Zhangzhou general area named Tiandihui,
Mhm.
which means this, Heaven and Earth Society. And the original aim, the objective of the society was to overthrow the Qing dynasty, which was the invaders from the north,
Mhm.
and to bring back the Ming dynasty that was perceived as the rightful, inheritor of the
Enter of
throne.
those throne.
But obviously, they never succeeded in that. And as it became more and more obvious that it's not going to go in that direction, some of those groups it developed into several different societies, and those groups further divided into like what we now call criminal organized crime
Mhm.
societies, or like criminals of different levels of organization,
Mm.
so to say.
Interesting. Um, as a foreigner who, because you talked a lot about karate, Wing Chun, White Crane, have you ever felt, because it's a very foreign sport, foreign martial art for you
Yeah, yeah,
especially,
yeah.
have you ever felt like you really proved yourself at one point? Have you ever felt like
In what way?
have you ever won a competition or you reached some level of mastery that
Um,
you felt like that's the point where I can say I mastered
I,
it?
I never felt, or for most part, I never felt the need to compete. And but what happened in my case was that back in 2009, I started. 2009 was my first visit to China. We went to Hong Kong. My friends and myself, we went to Hong Kong. We came to Guangzhou, into Foshan, Heshan, and places like that. And we met with other Wing Chun practitioners from different schools. And what we do is what we often do is like we call it jiaoliao, which is like what's the English word for that?
Communication, like networking, right?
Yeah, not
Networking.
communication, but it's more like um, it's like discussion,
Hmm.
something like that. But then it's not discussion in terms of like verbal exchange of ideas. It's like I'll give you an example.
It's like exchanging
I was in
experience and.
Heshan, and we went to see those guys from a Wing Chun school we had no idea about. We didn't know who we're going to meet or what they're going to do. So they said, okay, let's do, because we didn't speak the same language, and I couldn't speak Chinese at the time. My Cantonese was very basic, so we couldn't talk. So we were in this temple like space where we were on one side and they were on the other side. And so they did some demos, we did some demos, and then we got to this point where neither us nor them knew what to do. And then one of them stepped in front, and he like is like, "Come," right? Like I'm like, "What is this guy doing?" And I look at my guys, and you're like, "Lukas, go!" And I'm like, "Okay." So I go. We start punching out with the guy, right? Like we have no gloves or anything. We try to punch each other. Like it was something in between an exercise and a full blown fight. Like if you saw us from the side, you'd probably
think
like,
that they're
why are
fighting,
these
yeah.
guys fighting? And then we took turns fighting. Different guys were fighting different guys. And the trick is it's stressful because you never know what you're gonna do or what, like, who you're gonna meet. Like I remember I was in Hong Kong once, and this guy comes in, and I was practicing with somebody, like it was regular practice, and the guy I was practicing with sees that other guy's like, "Oh, don't practice with this guy." I'm like, "Why not?" "Because he's a street fighter." I'm like, "Okay." And it was hot, so I was like, "Oh, I need to sit down and take a break." So I sat down, and the street fighter guy comes up. He's like, "Oh, do you want to practice?" I'm like, "Okay." So I'm thinking in my mind, I'm going like, we're gonna practice, right? And this guy just unloads, right? And I start bleeding from my arms because I don't know what happened, but like I look at my hand, and I'm like, there's like the blood is dripping down my
But was he
finger.
using the like a street fight style, or was still in the area of the
He was
rule of
it was
Wing
long, it
Chun?
was long time ago, but he was moving fast, and I wouldn't call it any particular martial. I bet he was thinking he was doing Wing Chun, but for me it looked like just a madman trying to punch my head off. So I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what kind of movie we're in. And I don't remember exactly, because again, that was 2011 maybe. And I think I punched him in the face, and in the end, he was like, "Oh, it's okay." It's okay. But it's again, it's not an actual fight. What we will think is like a real fight, but then it's not practice either.
Do you think everything that they show in the movie, like Bruce Lee and all those guys, is it real to use
No,
that
no,
skill like that?
no. I mean, it's movies. It's fun to watch.
It looks cool, but
Yeah, it does. Like, and then you have
but let's
different
say if I
styles.
really want to, let's say I have a goal to master it at that level, will I be able to drop at least a couple of guys like they could do, like they're doing in the movie? Or there's no way. There's no way.
I've seen video clips on the internet where people with just sheer fighting will and like madness were just unloading on the group. Like one guy, there was this one guy fighting like 12 guys,
Oh,
but
wow.
he was like, they surrounded him and they were punching, and he jumped out of the crowd somehow, and they started running away. I'm like, what the hell am I watching? So it's not always like, if you face, like if I face more than two guys, we're like, okay, I'm backing out of this. But like some people, they're just so savage that they don't need a lot of technique. But if they do have the technique, there's even better
Even
for
better.
them.
It reminds me, have you seen that Chinese police guy who took down one security who was trying to make a mess? It's actually not coming from Kung Fu or Wing Chun. It comes from wrestling, I think, where he jumps on his neck and he's doing a twist and he drops him on the
Oh
ground.
no, that was a demonstration.
Have you seen that?
That was a demonstration.
Was it a demonstration
Yeah.
or was it real?
No.
I thought-
That was a demonstration that they did.
I think I saw in the video the guy was shouting and pushing other people, and
Yeah,
then this policeman just jumps in and he's just literally jumping on his neck, and then he make like a spin, and then he drops him on the
Yeah,
ground.
that was a demo,
like
and
magic.
it's like if you do that, like I sometimes watch those videos and I read comment sections and people think it's real. I'm like, how do you think it's real? And if we're on the topic of those demos, I used to work for the school where there was a demo like this organized. The school organized this to prepare the students and the teachers for like emergency, like if a madman, because there was like a knife attack a couple of days earlier before that, and they decided to do those like drill sort of thing. And there was a guy who was supposed, like we were told that there's going to be a guy wielding a fake knife, and we like, and I for the fun of it, I just walked down with like a wooden sword, and I started banging on the handrails. I was like, "Where is the war?" And they look at me like, And there's no demo, but this is how they organize. It's like like a demo drill demo
Drill
or
demo
something like that. Yeah.
to showcase. Actually, I believe that when I saw it, I was like, wow! I watched it like 10 times. I
No, I
think
mean
in a
it's
slow mo and everything.
a lot of this stuff is physically doable, but practically it would be really
It
hard
needs
to
to be a
pull that
perfect
off.
situation to
Yeah,
use
yeah,
that skill, especially that kind of
yeah,
how you call it, like a technique
yeah.
to take someone
Yeah, no,
down.
I saw that and I was like, these people think it's real? No.
So some people say that Wing Chun only works in theory,
Hmm.
and I think we already touched on the topic that it can really be used if you want to protect yourself.
Hmm.
But how big is the chance? Let's say if I'm not in a real fight with someone who do boxing or MMA
Right.
or anything like that. Let's say I'm just on the street. There's a random dude trying to take my wallet.
Hmm.
How big is the chance that if I'm mastering in karate or Wing Chun, I have a chance to take him down?
Uh, it's okay. So it's now I don't want to sound biased. Oh, here's this guy who does Wing Chun,
Mm-hmm,
so obviously
mm-hmm.
he's going to say, "Hey, this is great." On the plus side, it's surprising to people on the receiving end because Wing Chun is based on the idea that that you start by striking people, even if they're striking it, your counter is
Mm-hmm.
striking back at them along a straight line. So and you know a lot of people get really surprised by that because they don't expect that. They expect
Mm-hmm.
like
Is someone
blocking,
gonna
like
block or
right.
run away, right?
And I've again I'm better at self defense in that I'm fairly good at avoiding violent situations. That but then again I've seen and I heard of situations where people attacked and they were really surprised. Like they might have been good fighters, but because they were surprised at this very early stage of aggression, they couldn't do anything else because they just got punched out.
Now I'm thinking about it. Do you think it's ever have a chance to be in the world class fight championships? Because
Mm,
you know what happened is no one thought that UFC can exist because it's
right.
actually a mixed martial arts. I don't know if you watch it, but there's some people who doing like
Occasionally, yeah. Yeah,
Brazilian
yeah,
dance, martial, and that. And they actually, some of them, they're not becoming superstars because obviously the grappling and the Muay Thai, there's going to be always the primary when you can take someone down and punch them in the head. But there's some people actually succeeding with
yeah,
completely different
yeah, yeah.
techniques.
I noticed that.
Do
Yeah.
you think there's every chance that someone can go to an octagon with
I
something like
remember it
that?
was there was when I don't remember which formula it was, what organization it was. There was some guy doing some form of Wing Chun. Um, I have a friend who's a kickboxing slash MMA coach or sparring partner for like fighters. And I asked him this question once. I said, I was contemplating some traditional martial arts technique, and I said, listen, you're a pretty a solid Thai boxing guy. Like, do you think this could work? And I explained the technique to him, and he said something like this. He said, if you can make it work, that means it's useful.
Mm.
And so I like first of all, if you want to compete, let's say you're a Wing Chun guy or a karate or like whatever, a White Crane guy, and you want to compete in a athletic event that is MMA or kickboxing or whatever. Um, Obviously, you need to understand how they train and how they fight. You need to learn a lot of what they do because otherwise, you don't stand a
Of
chance.
course, you need to know their techniques as
Right.
well to adapt to it.
But if you can marry these concepts, if you can make it work, then yeah, like anything is possible.
Have you ever used it yourself on the street?
I had like most of my encounters, other than my school experience. My school wasn't a fun place to be. Uh, but other than that, my encounters were of the realm of weird and funny more than like really life and death, which was like I don't want to be in a life and death situation. I'm not an idiot, but I'll tell
Actually,
you.
it can scare people. I think if the guy gonna stand in the karate stand, I'm gonna doubt myself. I'm gonna be like, is he joking around or he really knows some stuff?
He's not going to go like, ooh. But I'll tell you the funny stuff that happened to me. I used to live in another province, I don't want to say where or which school it happened in, but I was working for a school, and there was this security guard there,
Yeah.
and every time I passed through the gate, I could smell that he's been drinking. Right? He was always most of the time he was fine with me. So like he was. I wouldn't call him nice, but he wasn't offensive towards me or anything. So I was like, okay, let him drink. Like doesn't matter. But I remember one time I'm going out of the school, and he extends his arm like if he's trying to shake my hand. I'm like, what is he up to? Because it seemed weird. And when I went out to I tried to shake his hand, he tried to put me in the joint lock.
Oh wow.
So I
accept the challenge.
and I was very I was very familiar with that particular joint lock. So I was like,
He probably didn't expect that.
so I was like, I know what you're trying to do. So I immediately span him around, and I put him in a
I can
chokehold.
only guess how surprised he got.
I don't know if he was surprised because he was with his back towards me because I was holding him in a chokehold. But the guy that was with him, he was facing me. He was like, "Oh!" He really crapped his pants, and that was one. And then there was one not so long ago. I was traveling in Europe, and I was going to 7-Eleven, but it was a weird setup because like the door to the 7-Eleven was on the corner. So when I was walking down the street, I couldn't see the door until the moment I passed by.
Okay.
And as I'm walking towards the door, I see this guy. He's attached to the door like Spider-Man. He's
Like he's holding it.
yeah, like he's pulling, like he's
Really?
yeah, and his leg is on the door frame, and he's pulling and he's shouting something, he's kicking. Now I don't know the language because it was it was another country, and his friend is standing behind him, like I don't know what's going on. So my first initial reaction was like, okay, so the door is locked. They probably locked the door. They're letting all the customers pay, and, but they locked the door already. But then I'm thinking like, no, it's 7-Eleven. It's 24/7, right? So I passed by him to see if there was like another store on the other side, and then I realized I shouldn't be walking in that direction. That was a mistake. So I'm trying to go back, and the guy's already in my face, and he's like, he really took something because he's like fists on to his sides, and he's like walk. And I'm thinking like it was just seconds, but I'm thinking like he's walking towards me way too fast and way too aggressive.
You feel it. You always can sense it.
Yeah,
You
but
always can sense
I'm thinking like if I don't do something now, this is gonna be it's going to be too close. But then again, I didn't want to do this because if you do this, like if somebody does this to you, what do you want to punch them in the face, right? Because it's annoying when somebody puts their hands in your face. So I'm like, so I don't know what he's shouting. I don't know what language it is. So I wanted to say, I don't know what you're saying, right? But I didn't even have time for this. So all I could say is like, I don't know, right? But I did this. And because I raised my hands like this, he stopped. Because I honestly, like, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but he stopped. And I'm like, there was like a 3 seconds freeze frame where he's standing like this. And I'm holding my hands up, and I'm thinking like, if he moves, I'm going to punch him the hell out, right? But I'm like, I was nervous. I was pretty scared. But I'm like, I'm just going to punch him out. And the guy, he just stood like this. And then he turned away and he walked away. And the funny thing is like to leave the place, I needed to stand right next to both of them to wait for the light to turn green. And so that was awkward because I'm standing there, like they're cruising around, and I'm like, so what do I do now?
Yeah,
and
pretend normal.
And I remember it's more of a self-defense story than martial arts story because I remember that when I was reading about self-defense, there is a concept called posturing, right? And posturing is like, even if you're scared or nervous, you pretend that you are not, and that you're like, so you can pretend, for which is what I did. You can pretend that you're angry. And so I was standing, it must have looked funny because I was standing waiting for the light to turn green, and they're standing like a little bit further away from me than you are now. And they look like they're trying to approach me, but then they don't want to. And so I faced them square on. and I'm like, I'm pretending I'm pissed off, and I'm,
Mm.
spitting on the sidewalk because I'm thinking like, okay, I need to do something to make them not, because I didn't want to fight them. Um, and then the light turns green, and I
No,
just
it actually
start.
works. I believe in that. The way how you speak, I heard even the way how you breathe, that can affect.
No, I never, I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, your postures, of course, that gives the signals, and some people can sense it, because I believe a lot of people who in that kind of situation, they're also nervous. You have to be extremely confident
Oh yeah,
to really thinking that you're gonna attack someone and don't feel nervous about
I've
it.
asked.
Most of the people, they're even more nervous than you do.
Yeah, I've asked a friend of mine who's really experienced in like different kinds of fighting. When he was younger, he used to hang out with like sort of criminal folks. And I said, like, I asked him, like, are you afraid? And like, I was a kid back then, so I wanted to know. I was fascinated because he was a street guy. So I mean, street fighter, right? And I asked him, like, are you afraid? And he said, only an idiot is not afraid.
Exactly,
So it like
exactly.
it makes you feel better, because sometimes you get in a situation like this, and afterwards you like you think you're blaming yourself, like, oh, why did I get scared? I shouldn't be like, you're always scared. It's
Right.
just how you deal with
Deal with
that.
it, and you need that pressure. You need the pressure
Yeah.
in that situation to makes you do something. One of the more things I want to touch, we talked about it at the backstage, that karate is usually marked as Japanese
Right.
martial art, where actually the origins are coming from China.
Right.
Can you clarify on that for everyone?
Oh yeah. So without getting into too much detail, because that would take some time.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, Okinawa was not Japanese territory. I'm not very well acquainted with Japanese or Okinawan history, but back then, which is like, I don't know, I don't want to lie to you now, but must have been maybe 17th, 18th century. Okinawa was, it was always threatened from, by Japan, by Japanese invasion. So if I'm not mistaken, the king of the Okinawa, or some part of Okinawa at least, he asked the Chinese emperor for help. So the Chinese emperor, China relocated Chinese families from Fujian province to Okinawa to boost the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these people were martial arts practitioners. So, but they kept martial arts to themselves. Even nowadays, a lot of Chinese people are like, oh, you're a foreigner, we're not going to teach it. And back then, it was like this times 100. So what happened was, the next generations of Chinese people in Okinawa were martial arts practitioners, and they developed it locally into something that was called, I think they just called it.
Was it made on purpose that they moved martial art participants, or it was just that area that they moved from?
Yeah, the area, because it was
Uh-huh.
fully, it was populated densely by people who were like Fujian province,
Mm-hmm,
what we
mm-hmm.
mentioned when we were talking about secret societies. A lot of these people were martial arts practitioners. So after, I don't remember how many generations, maybe second, third generation, people who were born and raised in Okinawa, but they were descendants of the Chinese, they were like, hey, I want to learn more about that. So they traveled back to China to
Oh,
learn
to
more.
master it.
Yeah, and then they developed something which is, which I think, I don't want to mess it up because I don't speak Okinawan, but in Okinawan language, it's called, I think it's called, um, uh, Todi or something like that. Like, if anybody
We'll
watching
double
this,
check. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right,
yeah,
right, right. Ask them to do
but what
it.
this basically means Chinese hand, Chinese,
Mm-hmm,
as in
mm-hmm.
is in Tang Shou. Because Tang, the name of the dynasty, it refers to stuff that is Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
So it was originally called Chinese hand.
Hand.
But then at the beginning of the 20th century, when Okinawa became the Japanese territory, they wanted to Japan wanted to use traditional martial arts to promote physical culture and fitness, and they discovered this amazing, cool new thing called
Mm.
Chinese hand. They were like, we want to use that, but the problem is this Chinese hand name is, our
Mm.
main rival there. We can't
Exactly.
be practicing and promoting something that is called Chinese hand. So somebody proposed, and it's not clear who, but I think the guy, if I'm not mistaken, I think the guy was named Hanashiro Chomo, the guy who wrote a book about karate. he used a different different character, which was pronounced the same in Japanese, because Chinese hand in Japanese was karate.
Oh,
But they
wow.
ditched that kara character and they replaced it with another character that's also pronounced kara, which is
Kara.
empty hand. And from that point,
They switched it from Chinese hand to the empty hand.
yeah, yeah. So because they say, oh, it's a martial art of fighting without weapons, so this name will be, suitable as well. So they moved away from associating themselves with China, and they changed the name. But I also, from that point on, obviously a lot of Japanese people started practicing it because it was new, and all the stuff that is new is like cooler than the
Oh,
old
they gave
stuff.
it to the people and everything.
So, and also people wanted, into the 20th century, they wanted to use it as a sport event. So, naturally, if you, as we mentioned before, if you want to turn a martial art into an athletic event, you need to introduce some changes into it. And so the changes that the Japanese introduced made what some people call the Japanese version of karate, which is what we think, like what people in the West think of karate when they think karate, right? That it is Japanese. It's not really Japanese. And even today, there are two distinctive versions. There is a Japanese karate and Okinawan karate.
I have to say, Lucas, that's absolutely amazing how much you know about that. Cheers to that. Cheers to this knowledge, man. Should move to say it fast, right? I think it's time. So, have you watched our episodes in full before?
No.
I don't know why people not getting prepared for this.
No, I'm not very good at watching stuff in their entirety.
Right,
if it's unless it's a movie that is like 90 minutes long.
So the last thing we do here called Say It Fast. I'm gonna ask you a series of random questions. Some of them short answers, some of them yes or no, some of them you need to think a little bit.
I'm not very good at that.
I can't promise you anything at this point.
I overthink stuff.
Again, I'm gonna try to ask you as fast as I can. You have to tell me the first thing that pops in your head. You don't have to answer right, but I hope you will.
What topic are they on?
Absolutely anything. Completely random questions.
Okay, let's try.
You ready?
No.
$1 million or unlimited amount of coffee?
$1 million.
Can money buy happiness?
I don't think so.
Blonde girls or dark hair ones?
Doesn't matter.
Why the grass is green?
I don't know.
Self-control or self-satisfaction?
Say it again.
Self-control or self-satisfaction?
Self-control. I think they're almost the same thing.
Name 5 biggest countries in the world.
Russia, China, Canada, US, and Brazil.
What's the longest river in China?
Yangtze River.
What's the capital of the United States?
Washington, D.C.
Have you ever lied about your height on a dating app?
I've never been on a dating app.
Would you rather date a rich girl who is boring or a broke girl who is fun?
The latter.
Should a guy always pay on the first date?
Sounds okay, yeah.
How old will you be in 2048?
Oh, a maths question. 2040, I don't know. I don't even want to try. I'm gonna come across as an idiot.
And the last one. This one you can take slow and think about it. What is the purpose of life?
Never figured it out. No. I'm still trying to figure it out. It's a question I ask people, and people get as confused.
What gives you purpose?
I guess things I'm passionate about. All the stuff that we were talking about in this podcast. Also, stuff that we haven't touched upon, which is movies and music. I have a little bit of experience in
So I guess tonight we can help you to phrase it. Then the purpose of life is passion.
Well said.
Lucas, it was a beautiful conversation. Thank you for tonight. Cheers.